Good Friday evening to you, literally in this case. Hope your weekend is off to a good start. I'm Dave Bacon. Welcome to More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. Pretty full show, and no surprise, we're going to talk plenty of Cleveland Browns football as the NFL draft in a couple of weeks coming up, a couple weekends from now. The Browns will make that 10th overall selection. Still some free agent news on the horizon as well. And we will get things started by welcoming in Dan Labbe. He is the Browns beat reporter here at cleveland.com. Dan, appreciate the time. They've come out and said the draft will take place as originally scheduled, and it will be a virtual draft. What have you heard about that? What challenges does that present? And I guess it's kind of nice that you have a young head coach and a young GM that are Ivy League educated, because they should be able to figure this stuff out pretty easily.
Right. If any front office can do this, it's going to be the Browns front office with Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry, Paul DePodesta, who was working on the West Coast for a while and does a lot of working from home. So he's probably set up for this. I think the biggest challenge is pre-draft. If we're being honest, how are they going to adjust to some of the pre-draft stuff and how they have to do virtual interviews and things like that? I think that's the biggest challenge to all of this, because really on draft night, obviously you love to be in the same room together. You love to have those arguments and discussions. But, in a lot of ways, this kind of gives you an out for a lot of NFL GMs. Hey, if you screw up this draft, you can go back and say, this was a weird draft and it was set up weird. We just didn't have the best resources to do this. So I don't know, maybe it ends up being a good thing for some of these teams and GMs.
A lot is made that you didn't have the pro days and you didn't have some of the things that you normally would have, where you get that extra information about the potential guys you're going to draft. Everybody's on the equal playing field, though, but is that a real thing as you get deeper into the draft, do you think?
I think it could be. I think with, being able to go and see guys and stand next to them and interview guys, you do gain something from that, I think. So, losing that aspect of it really hurts. And, I remember hearing stories about Justin Gilbert, how some teams, obviously not the Browns, but some teams maybe took him off their board after they talked to him on a pro day, right? So maybe this guy's tape was good, but then you talked to him and figured some things out about him. And you ended up not really wanting to draft him again, unless you were Ray Farmer in the Browns. So I think having everybody on a level playing field is going to be a good thing, but you do lose something by not having the contact with these prospects.
The other thing that we have to take into account, how big of a challenge is it, given that this is the first draft for Andrew Berry as a GM and the first draft for Kevin Stefanski as a head coach, and you can't do the things that you normally do. That's got to be a bit of a challenge for them.
Yeah, it just adds another wrinkle to two guys who know each other and they met each other in the interview process last year and kind of had met each other before that as well, but they've never worked together in a draft room. And so now when you add in this wrinkle of you're going to be in a bunch of different locations, you're going to have scouts in a bunch of different locations, it just makes it more difficult. The communication with Kevin Stefanski in Minnesota and Andrew Berry, we actually don't know where Andrew Berry is right now. We're going to get a chance to talk to him in the next day or two. We don't know if he's in Cleveland or where he is exactly. So, Paul DePodesta probably out on the West Coast. It just adds more wrinkles to having to communicate at a time when you really do have to be able to communicate well, and they just don't have that vibe for each other on a draft night yet.
All right, let's move on to some player news, and a lot was made that the Browns were involved in talking to Jadeveon Clowney, one of the big names still out there in free agency. Came out yesterday that the Seahawks are likely moving past him. We'll see if that's true or not. What's your sense with Clowney? It's rumored that the Browns, Titans, and Jets are still the teams that are kind of in that mix. How real do you think that is? Could you see them, potentially signing him to a short-term deal?
I think if that price drops, it's a realistic option. Obviously, they were they were in on Clowney a little bit. The price didn't quite match up, but I think the Browns want to be aggressive and they want to add more pass rushers. And you could realistically, if you sign Clowney, you can move on from Olivier Vernon. You can make it a front-loaded deal. and maybe make it 2 years or something, where after 2 years you could get out of it. Think about the Sheldon Richardson deal that they signed last year, except obviously this would be more expensive. As that price comes down, though, I think it could become more realistic that the Browns could really remain in and maybe even bring in a guy like Jadeveon Clowney. I wouldn't rule anything out with how aggressive this front office has been, and he's still a young guy too, and he seems to complement Myles Garrett. There's just a lot of boxes you can check there with Clowney.
And Clowney, a lot is made, oh, he only had 3 sacks. If you saw him play, he's a guy that people have all kinds of trouble blocking. He is very disruptive. He may not get sacks, but the opposing team knows where he is lining up and where he is coming from on every play.
Yeah, and he's also really good against the run, which I think complements Garrett well too, because Garrett's a guy that hasn't been great against the run. You see that sometimes with edge rushers. They're so aggressive, teams will kind of get them. When they get a good push, teams will get them on a draw play or something like that. Clowney on the other side, really good against the run. And you said, I mean, this is a guy that gets into the backfield. I remember just the Browns Seahawks game last year alone, and there are other examples of this as well. But Clowney is a guy that was getting into the backfield, and even if he wasn't bringing down the quarterback, he was creating pressure and making life miserable. And it's just something else an offensive line has to worry about. And you love to set that up, especially with Garrett on the other end, who was on his way to a career year last year. He's got a chance to really step forward if he would have a guy like Clowney across from him.
The other thing is, as you mentioned, the Browns can get out of the Vernon contract. Is there any way you see both of them coming, or do you think it's pretty much an either or? Because the money would be relatively close, I would guess.
Yeah, I think so, as Clowney's price drop. So I think it would be an either or. I don't think you can have both guys, because if you're going to have Clowney, you're going to play him 80% of the time on that end. And so then Vernon, of course, would lose those snaps, and Vernon would want to play, starting caliber, starting number of snaps. So I think it's an either or. If you sign Clowney, Vernon's out the door.
And the other thing is, you could, in theory, do that salary cap wise, but again, you don't want to tie that kind of money up. Let's shift gears slightly. Browns signed a number of free agents. Who did you like? What guy or guys that Andrew Berry and Stefanski signed, do you think, boy, this really fits what we've heard they want to do?
Obviously, there's the big name guys, but I'm going to go off the big name guys. I'm going to stick on that defensive line, actually. I really liked the signing of Andrew Billings on the inside and then Adrian Claiborne on the outside. I think that combination, you add depth at two really important positions. I think Billings is still a young guy who can be really good. Sheldon Richardson, he's in that situation where you can move on from him after year two if you think he's a little too expensive. Larry Ogunjobi is going to be up for a contract after this year. So Billings offers you some flexibility. It's a 1-year deal. You kind of get to get a feel for him, and then if you want to extend him or sign him long term, you can come up with something there. And then Claiborne, kind of the rare 2-year deal on the defensive side of the ball for these guys. I really like what he brings, because this team needed an edge rusher last year. They didn't get the production they got the year before from some guys, depth at defensive end. And I think Claiborne gives you that to kind of relieve Myles Garrett and relieve whoever's on that other side.
The other thing is obviously they had that huge address that they needed to do with the offensive line. Conklin seems to fit exactly what they needed, and it enables them to plug a pretty big hole. And they've got draft capital to plug the other big hole they had up there. How well does he fit into what they want to do?
Conklin was like right place, right time. The Browns switched to this zone blocking scheme. He hits free agency. The Browns need 2 tackles. So they're going to go out. They have a ton of money to spend. It was absolutely right place, right time for Jack Conklin and for the Browns. He fits perfectly into what Kevin Stefanski wants to do. There's going to be a little bit of a learning curve there, but one of the reasons he came here is he looked at the scheme and he said, this fits me. So, he gets paid, he gets into a scheme that fits really well. And finally, 4 years after they let Mitchell Schwartz walk, the Browns solved their right tackle problem. And now they can try and address left tackle in the draft.
When you look at what the roster is right now, obviously left tackle they need. What other areas do you think need a pretty significant upgrade before you're ready to get the ball on the field at some point in time, hopefully?
Yeah, I still think safety is a question mark. You signed a couple of veteran guys there, and Carl Joseph is a younger guy, in his 20s. Andrew Sendejo, he's a Band-Aid. across from him. So I think you still need some safety help, which is why I think there's so much talk about maybe a safety later in the draft for the Browns or in the second or third round for the Browns. I think you need that position. Linebacker, are you going to go in there with Mack Wilson as your starter? Maybe, but you've got to have some options behind him. Part of that is why you signed B.J. Goodson, but I'd like to see them maybe be a little more aggressive at linebacker and see if they can just sort of shore that up a little bit, just in case Mack Wilson isn't ready to make that leap to be your middle linebacker.
Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter here on cleveland.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. When we return, we'll talk draft, what the Browns might do at 10, what they might do a little bit later in the draft as well. More sports and less Levine, the weekend winners edition. Dan Labbe will be back with us after this timeout. Stay with us.
Presque Isle Downs and Casino has sports betting. Use one of our 50 state-of-the-art Bet America kiosks to place your bet and watch your favorite games on one of our many HD televisions or visit our sportsbook area. Only at Presque Isle Downs and Casino.
As a kid growing up, my dream was to go to college, play baseball, and get a degree. Coming out of high school, I had two choices. I was accepted into a four-year university, but I decided to come to Tri-C after receiving a scholarship. I got my associate's degree at Tri-C. They transferred all my credits straight into Baldwin-Wallace, so I started at Baldwin-Wallace University as a junior. My name is Tyler Wirth, and I earned my first degree at Tri-C.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. Welcome back to More Sports and Less Levine, the weekend winners edition. I'm Dave Bacon. Browns beat reporter Dan Labbe will rejoin us in just a minute. We have been a mock weekend for the last couple of weeks. A look at the most recent mock drafts, and we will continue that trend. Again, all of these mock drafts within the past 3-4 days. Jason McIntyre from Fox Sports has Jeff Kuda going third. Pretty much the consensus is it's Joe Burrows and Chase Young going 1 and 2. So Okudah 3, Becton going 4, Mekhi Becton going 4 to the Giants, Jedrek Wills going 8 to the Cardinals, Isaiah Simmons a spot before the Browns pick at 9 to the Jaguars, and then he has McIntyre has the Browns taking Tristan Wirfs with Andrew Thomas still on the board. So he has Iowa's Tristan Wirfs going to the Browns. Let's look at Chris Trapasso from CBS Sports. He has Tua going to the Dolphins and Okudah going to the Lions. The Dolphins trading up to 3 and taking Tua. He has Jedrek Wills going 4 to the Giants. Simmons going 7 to the Panthers. He has the Buccaneers trading up in front of the Browns to take Tristan Wirfs. And then the Browns taking Andrew Thomas, the tackle from Georgia, with the 10th pick. And then Daniel Jeremiah from NFL.com has Okudah going 3, Wirfs going 4. He has the Dolphins taking Herbert over Tua going 6. Wills going 8 to the Cardinals. Becton going 9 to the Jaguars. And Daniel Jeremiah from NFL.com has the Browns taking Isaiah Simmons with Thomas still on the board. So there you have it. Again, a number of guys with a number of different scenarios, and it's kind of interesting. You can find guys who like each and every one of those 4 tackles that are on the board. Let's bring Dan Labbe back in. Dan, you saw some of the mock drafts there. Do you see the potential if Isaiah Simmons is there that the Browns would take him at 10?
He's the wild card in all of this. And I think Daniel Jeremiah actually explained why you might take Isaiah Simmons really well in that mock draft. He said, you're going to have to essentially you're going to have to face Lamar Jackson twice a year, the reigning MVP. And it would be nice to have a playmaker like Simmons to sort of attack Jackson, and you compare him up with Myles Garrett, who's super athletic on the end, and you have a couple guys that maybe can help contain a guy like Lamar Jackson. So that's sort of your reasoning there. It's that do everything defensive player. I think he's the wild card in all of this. Is if he's sitting there at number 10, the Browns could take him. The Browns could kind of auction off that pick and move down a few spots and add some more picks if they felt like they could get a tackle at, let's just throw out random numbers, 12, 13, 17, something like that. I think what might dictate that is if they really like one of these other tackles, say an Ezra Cleveland or someone like that, who maybe isn't projected among that top group, but they feel they can get him maybe by trading up into the first round or moving down off of 10. I think that's sort of where the maneuvering would start.
Do you think, and again, do you get a sense this front office in this incarnation this year is more likely to trade up from 10 or down from 10 and then move back into the first round?
I think the only reason they would trade down is if they really believe they could get a guy they like and be able to add picks. This isn't 2016 and 2017 all over again, where they're going to trade down just for the sake of acquiring more assets. They're going to look to add players that they really like, and they're not going to trade out of good players if they think that player fits their need. I just don't think they're in sell mode right now. They want to add really good players. Free agency, I believe, sends a message, hey, the Browns are serious. They're going to add players. Andrew Berry said he's going to be aggressive. He has lived up to that so far. So I think anything's on the table. And if there is a left tackle that they believe separates from the others and maybe they can jump up and grab him, it would not shock me if they decided to make that move. They don't have a ton of draft capital necessarily to move up, but I'm sure they could pull something together if there was one left tackle that they really liked.
When you look at these guys, and we've heard about them all along, you've heard the name. Is there one that seems to fit that zone running style a little bit better than the others, or is there one that doesn't really fit that scheme as much as the others, do you think?
I'm not sure if there's one that doesn't necessarily fit. I think you can probably slide all of them in. I think the interesting thing here is how the Browns feel about some of these guys who played right tackle all through college. So now you've got to move them over to left tackle. Andrew Thomas is a guy that has played left tackle. Tristan Wirfs, some of these other guys, they've been over on that right side, and there is a little bit of an adjustment there. And I think Browns fans need to kind of keep in mind that moving into this new scheme, maybe moving to that left side, it might take a little time. Everyone's been a little spoiled because Joe Thomas stepped on the field game 1 in 2007 and didn't leave the field for 10,000 plus snaps. I don't know if the guy you're going to draft at number 10 or wherever you pick is going to be able to just slide in and adjust to that scheme and adjust to that side as easily as Joe Thomas was able to step in at left tackle and play for 11 years. But I don't think there's going to be an issue with any of these guys eventually becoming that long-term answer at left tackle.
And it's kind of interesting that there are so many of them, and really, it seems like each of them, which teams like them is just based on, do you like chocolate ice cream? Do you like vanilla ice cream? There isn't a huge separation. It's more about the qualities that you're looking for in any given tackle.
And that's what helps the Browns, because even though, the Giants we saw in all those mocks possibly taking a tackle to try and protect Daniel Jones. Okay, so maybe the Giants take a guy. Maybe, the Panthers take a guy, or, 2 or 3 of these guys even come off the board before you get to 10. There's still a lot of talent at that position. This is such a deep tackle draft, and they're going to have opportunities to, if they don't necessarily get their number 1 guy, I think their number 2 guy, their number 3 guy, they're all going to be legitimate, real options at number 10 to fix that left tackle problem.
When you look deeper in the draft, is there anybody that kind of, you're kind of, Browns fans, you really need to keep your ear out for this guy because he might be somebody that the Browns are looking for later in the draft, 2nd round, 3rd round, 4th round?
I just think it's a matter of what they do at 10, right? If they take Isaiah Simmons, then you've got to start looking at, a name I mentioned earlier, a guy like an Ezra Cleveland, who is so good at the combine and tested so well. Can the Browns resist drafting a guy with Cleveland as his last name, and the fans, all these fans that bought the generic jerseys and just threw Cleveland on the back because you can never find a name to put on there that's going to stick around. They're all the winners in that scenario. So I would just keep an eye on some of those second tier left tackles, just in case a guy like Isaiah Simmons falls and the Browns want to either pick him or auction off that pick. I just think that's where the real intrigue is some of those guys down the board at left tackle. If the Browns really like one of those guys, even better than maybe some of the top names.
When you look at some of the other positions that aren't as obvious as, linebacker, safety, what are some other positions that you think they may look to upgrade or at least, solidify some depth in later in the draft?
Well, this is a deep wide receiver draft, and there might be a bunch of wide receivers that go in the first round, but this seems like it's a fairly deep wide receiver draft, and you could potentially bring in a guy, obviously Rashard Higgins is still out there, right? And that tells you that the Browns don't necessarily view bringing him back as a priority if they want to bring him back at all. So if you can go in the draft and find your third wide receiver or fourth wide receiver later in the draft, that would be great. And this is a regime that back in 2016, they took a bunch of wide receivers later in the draft. Now, they didn't really all work out, but this is a regime that has, with Andrew Berry at least, kind of sees value, I think, in late round wide receivers. So I would keep an eye on that position. And that's one that I kind of have circled that if things start to fall, they have 2 third-round picks. So maybe you find a receiver in the third round that you really like.
Can you see him taking another maybe developmental offensive lineman as well? Because they did have a number of holes to plug in, and you need to get that position where you can fill in from your depth.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a possibility, especially, at right guard. Right now you're looking at either Wyatt Teller or maybe a Drew Forbes, someone like that. That's still a position that's out there that hasn't been addressed. So maybe you can find an interior lineman, again, on day 3 in the draft that you can bring in, maybe like a Forbes. He's a small school guy, played tackle somewhere. I don't know. I don't have a name to attach to it, but maybe you find a guy that can come in and compete at that guard position. And if he's not ready to step in and start this year, down the road, maybe he can step in and play.
Dan Labbe, as always, we appreciate the time and the insight. Dan Labbe, you can read him in the pages of the Plain Dealer. You can see him on cleveland.com. Browns beat reporter, Dan Labbe. Appreciate it, Dan. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. So when we return, we're going to talk Tristan Wirth. We'll hear from an Iowa Hawkeyes beat reporter who knows an awful lot about Tristan Wirth, one of the guys the Browns are potentially looking at with that 10th pick in the first round. More sports and less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Celebrate NatureStone's 30-year anniversary with a free NatureStone floor. During 2020, we will be giving away 30 free floors to 30 very lucky customers to say thank you for making NatureStone the best concrete flooring solution for garages, basements, and more. Call or visit naturestone.com today to register to win, and we'll send you a copy of our new buyer's guide absolutely free. There's no purchase necessary. Winners will be chosen monthly. With over 30 million square feet installed for more than 60,000 customers, it's easy to see why I always say it's not just a floor. Wow, it's NatureStone.
Got your high lottery pick 3, I see.
Yup. Those glasses are hip.
Hip? Most people think I'm a square. But what's wrong with that? A box bet can increase your chances of winning. And what is a box? A square. There are so many ways to play. There's coming out the wazoo. Oh, shucks. Look at me yammering on. Put a lid in it, Picky Ricky. Play the Ohio Lottery Pick 3 today.
There are tastes we remember. Every smell brings the happiness of times gone by. Experience this every time you walk into Gallucci's Italian Foods. Whether you need lunch on the go, a catered party, or that perfect blend of wine, meats, and cheeses, Gallucci's has exactly what you're looking for. Straight from Mama's Kitchen for old world traditions or original experiences. From the tastes you remember to new flavors you'll never forget, Gallucci's is a tasty branch of your family tree.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Welcome back to More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. We continue as we look at the Browns in the upcoming NFL draft. Not a surprise, Browns are looking to strengthen that left tackle position. Likely will do it with the 10th pick in the draft. Earlier in the show, we looked at some of the names. Now it's time to get a little more in-depth and find out from some people who have covered these guys in college exactly what they bring to the table. With that in mind, let's welcome in Dargan Southard. He is the Iowa Hawkeyes beat reporter for the Des Moines Register. Obviously, we're going to start talking about Tristan Wirth. Dargan, first of all, appreciate the time very much. Thanks for joining us. Tell me a little bit about Tristan Wirth. We've heard phenomenal athletes, some crazy stories. What jumps out when I say Tristan Wirth, as a guy who's been a beat reporter covering him, what sticks out in your mind? What is the thing that jumps out about this guy?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it. I think the first thing that really steps out is reliability. You look at this guy who was, an Army All-American coming out of high school, had a lot of expectations, jumps right in, and I believe becomes the first true freshman to start at either offensive tackle positions in the Kirk Ferentz era, which goes back to 1999. So that's a pretty good chunk of time. So he comes in and with a lot of high school hype, jumps right in the starting lineup and takes off from there. And now, unsurprisingly, has a lot of hype going in the draft. So when you look at this guy, there's certainly no character risks. There's no really any sort of risks, other than just kind of the general way things go in the NFL with high picks sometimes. So if you're looking for a guy who can come in and probably contribute right away or pretty close to right away, on top of having kind of all the other intangibles that you want. I think reliability and stability are the biggest things when you look at what Tristan Wirth has done in his career and what he could bring to the Browns.
You hear all the stories about what kind of crazy athlete he is. Tell us some of the things, and you mentioned he came in very highly hyped as, he's an all-American type wrestler. Some of the things that he did with track and field as a discus thrower. Is this guy really that good of an athlete?
For sure, and I'm not sure where the pre-combine assessments came from that he wasn't, because that's been, as big of a consistent with him as anything. I remember the first article I wrote with him was on his signing day after he had just come back from the Army All-American game, and the picture that I used was him standing on his hands, probably still 300 pounds at that point. So, and then there was another video that circulated of him. They were all the guys were at Kirk Ferentz's house, and he stands flat-footed in the pool and jumps up to the side of the pool. So that's probably, at least a 5-6 foot standing jump. So, and then obviously you look at all the numbers that he set at the combine and whatnot. So, for a big guy, for a guy who, weighs a lot, obviously he moves really well. And that probably comes from some of that multi-sport background. This was a guy who had to drop 30 pounds, I believe, his senior year of wrestling to be able to compete to get, in his weight class, and goes out and wins a state title, comes back at the Drake Relays, which is a big track meet here, national track meet, and, wins the discus and the shot put, and then comes back at the state tournament and does the same thing. So there's no downplaying the athletic side of him. There's no downplaying the kind of the freak of nature, jaw-dropping side of him. That all is very real and very prominent as he kind of gets evaluated as a prospect for sure.
You've known him for a while. You mentioned you did a story with him on signing day. What type of kid is he, and how have you seen him kind of grow in his 4 years at Iowa or his time at Iowa?
Right. Yeah, I think that's again, that's right up there with probably the biggest positive looking at this guy. You obviously have a top 10 pick. It's a pretty big investment. You want to do your due diligence and, dig into guys' personalities and upbringings and stuff like that. And, I imagine these GMs digging into Tristan Wirth's background have not found many negative things. This is a guy who grew up in a small town, pretty traditional Iowa town in Mount Vernon. Had a lot of community support there, and his smile, I guess, and his just bubbly personality really resonates throughout the whole community, even as he's kind of accelerated to these lofty heights. So you haven't seen anything change with him. You haven't seen, kind of the whole thing, get absorbed in it and just, walk around like he was, the best thing on earth. You haven't seen any of that, and I wouldn't expect any of that to change just because, that's his natural personality. It's nothing forced. It's nothing, that's takes a lot of effort to come out of. He's just kind of a natural, fun, good guy to interview and good guy to be around. And even, obviously he was made available a lot throughout his career here, and we talked to him quite a bit. And, every single interview seemed like I don't want to say thoroughly enjoyed it, because I don't know how much those guys thoroughly enjoy talking to media, but every time we talked to him, it was the same guy, the same attitude, the same kind of, like I said, bubbly personality that you don't always see in football players, especially big-time prospects as well.
What about Kurt Ferentz? Playing for a guy like Kurt Ferentz, he's a guy that has developed a number of offensive linemen. What has Kurt Ferentz said about him, and where does this guy potentially rank coming out for an Iowa offensive lineman? That has some cachet. An Iowa offensive lineman is a pretty good offensive lineman.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely a strong reputation with offensive lineman development here and what Kirk Ferentz is able to do. And I know Kirk Ferentz has a lot of respect through the NFL circles and NFL coaches with what he's been able to churn out of there. And I think Tristan Wirth has a chance to be right at the top of the list of those guys. I mean, you think about kind of the big names, your Marshall Yondas, your Robert Galleries, your guys like that. I think Tristan Wirth has a chance to finish right at the top or even be better than those guys. This is something that, like I said, kind of him breaking in as a freshman, I think it was about the fourth or fifth game that he entered the starting lineup and ran from there. So, I think Kirk Ferentz, even though big-time prospects don't always not dominate his classes, I think he could tell pretty early that this was a special guy. And then when you blend in all the attributes that kind of happen off the field with, just incredible talent on the field, I think if you ask Kirk Ferentz, he's not too surprised about all that's come Tristan Wirth's way in the position that he has himself up next month and in the future as well.
What about competitive kid? Is he does he have that? It's said that you want an offensive lineman that's got a little bit of a nasty streak in him and is really competitive. Have you kind of seen that, as a guy that's watched him do battle, in the trenches in the Big Ten?
Yeah, it's funny because I guess the only mild narrative with him that's circulating is coaches have kind of had to bring that mean side out of him a little bit, just because it's so unnatural for him to be like that off the field. But then you look at his tape and the way he just runs over guys, just obliterates guys 5-8 yards down the field on run plays. You kind of wonder where, that it doesn't always seem to match up with that talk. So, I can see that a little bit why people have said that he needs to get more mean, I guess, in a speak, just because, his personality again is on the opposite end of the spectrum off the field. But I think, I don't think that's anything that's overly concerning or overly detrimental to his stock or anything like that. I think it's just kind of an interesting footnote at the bottom of his draft profile that at times coaches sometimes have had to force him to be a little meaner, a little more aggressive in certain settings. But I think all things considered, that's probably a pretty low concern for most people out there.
Okay. Dargan Southard, Iowa Hawkeyes beat reporter for the Des Moines Register. Now let's shift gears a little bit. What about you've got a defensive end, A.J. Epinesa, who's pretty talented as well, potential later first round pick. What have you seen from him? What jumps out about him?
Yeah, it's been interesting to kind of follow his stock the way that it's fluctuated a little bit more than what guys were saying and thinking during the season, because obviously he had, it was a little bit of a slow start to the season just with all the accolades and all the prestige that was around him. But he really finished really strong. And, the game that really sticks out is the game at Nebraska to end the regular season this past year. He had, I think 4 or 5 sacks, was in the backfield all day, just disrupting things and really kind of put everything in a 60-minute time frame, everything that you wanted to see from a guy like that. So, I know his combine performance wasn't that great, and that's probably a big, or at least somewhat of a factor in why he's sliding. I still think he goes in the first round, even though it may be more now in the 20s than, the high teens or there was even some single digit talks at some point in this offseason. So with him, I would say for anybody who's got questions about him, just throw on the film and throw on, the sheer double teams that he faced, the sheer focus from, pretty much every offensive line group. I imagine, when they were going through their meetings, had AJ Epinesa at the top of the list when he was, going to be on the other side on Saturday. So, it may be a little bit disappointing on draft day than what was expected for him, but I don't see any reason why he won't come into a camp hungry and probably feel a little slighted, and I imagine should roll right on through from there.
Well, Dargan Southard, we appreciate the time. Thanks very much. Iowa Hawkeyes beat reporter for the Des Moines Register. Thanks so much for the insight on Tristan Wirth and AJ Epinesa. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
All right, we will continue more sports and less Levine. We've now heard a little bit about Tristan Wirth. We'll take a look at some of the other guys that the Browns are looking at with that 10th pick. Some more tackle talk coming up. More sports and less Levine. The Weekend Winners Edition continues. Stay with us.
As a kid growing up, my dream was to go to college, play baseball, and get a degree. Coming out of high school, I had 2 choices. I was accepted into a 4-year university, but I decided to come to Tri-C after receiving a scholarship. I got my associate's degree at Tri-C. They transferred all my credits straight into Baldwin-Wallace, so I started at Baldwin-Wallace University as a junior. My name is Tyler Leonard, and I earned my first degree at Tri-C.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
It takes attention to detail. With your local Bryant dealer, you're getting more than just a technician. You're getting someone who pays attention to your needs and the little things that make a big difference. It takes a dealer you can rely on. And to keep your family warm this winter,
here, let me show you how this works.
It takes Bryant.
Bryant, whatever it takes.
And to keep your family comfortable, it takes Smiley One Heating and Cooling. Find them at SmileyOne.com.
Welcome back to more sports and less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. I'm Dave Bacon. We're going to continue on talking about the guys the Browns are looking at with that number 10 pick in the first round of the NFL draft. And we're going to stay with the offensive tackle position. Another one of the guys the Browns looking at, Jedrek Wills, the offensive tackle from the Alabama Crimson Tide. Let's welcome in Brett Hudson. He is the Crimson Tide beat reporter for the Tuscaloosa News. Brett, we appreciate the time. When you talk about Jedrek Wills, tell me about this guy and some of the things that you have seen as he has developed as a player.
Well, he started off as a road grader. He was a guy who was a really, really good run blocker, and he's obviously kept that over the course of his career. But as a starting tackle at Alabama, you're going to be charged with some of the best pass rushers, not only in the SEC, but in the nation, because the SEC tends to be pretty good at collecting those guys on a pretty consistent basis. And Jedrek Wills was able to handle those guys pretty consistently. I think I saw something from Pro Football Focus earlier this week, earlier this month. Time is just totally gone with this whole pandemic thing. No one has any recollection of time anymore. I think I saw he only allowed 1 sack or 1 quarterback pressure, something to that effect. So he's clearly a very, very good pass blocker too. And you obviously got to have excellence in both disciplines, run blocking and pass blocking, to be projected to be a first-round pick as an offensive tackle. And Jedrek definitely carries those skill sets, but that wasn't a surprise for him. Jedrek was a guy who was very highly rated, highly recruited out of Kentucky. And when he picked Alabama, there was a chance that someone as talented as him would earn a starting spot at Alabama to start, and he more or less did that. So he got 3 solid years of playing time at Alabama, and that's all he needed to be considered one of, if not the best offensive lineman in this draft.
When you look at guys that play for Nick Saban at Alabama, they're usually pretty ready to move on to the next level. Is that kind of the sense that you get, and what the coaching staff believed with Jedrek as well, that this was a guy that had pretty much everything you'd look for in an offensive lineman at the next level, at the NFL level?
Yeah, absolutely. Not only in the physical skills that I just mentioned, but also he's handled a lot of scheme in his time at Alabama. I mean, naturally, Alabama changes coordinators every 45 seconds, so he's getting a new scheme pretty regularly. He's learning a bunch of things, but his most recent offensive coordinator, Steve Sarkisian, very obviously has some professional experience in his background, coming to Alabama from the Atlanta Falcons. And they were very diverse in their running scheme because they had such a good offensive line across the board. They were allowed to be very multiple and versatile, to use a couple of coaching buzzwords, in how they orchestrated their run game. They also had an awesome running back in Najee Harris that could handle all of those things. So zone blocking, basic gap schemes, power, all of that. Jedrek Wills saw all of that in his college system. So not only does he have the physical tools to be rated this highly in the 2020 draft, but he's also seen enough in the college football ranks that he should transition to the next level pretty well, I think.
What type of kid is he? I know you as a beat reporter, you get to know him a little bit. What type of guy is he, and what have you observed about him as he's gone along and been a 3-year starter for the Crimson Tide?
I think the best compliment I can give Jedrek is that he appears in front of the media a lot at Alabama, which sounds kind of benign, but you got to remember, this is Alabama. This is one of the more notoriously anti-media, or at least not very media-friendly programs that there are in college football. So they keep it kind of close to the vest. So when someone appears in front of the media almost on a weekly basis, like Jedrek did, it tells you one of two things. It either tells you that they're really, really boring, and Alabama would appreciate that, right? They don't want any bulletin board material, anything like that coming out, or it tells you that they've got a good head on their shoulders, that they know how to conduct themselves in public. And Jedrek Wills is definitely the latter. I don't see him as a boring interview or a boring person. He knows how to conduct himself in front of microphones and media, and that obviously behooves someone who's trying to be a first-round draft pick in the NFL. So I think when you're looking to who Jedrek is as a person, I really think that's the best compliment I can give him, that Alabama, of all places, was willing to put him in front of the media on an almost weekly basis, because, again, he was someone that could handle that responsibility. He's mature and intelligent enough to handle a relatively out of control media session and do so the way Alabama would prefer that their players do it.
When you think of him, what do you think of? As a guy that has seen him play, if I say Jedrek Wills, what pops to your mind?
Physical run blocker, a very, very mean run blocker. And the development as a pass protector is something that came along over the course of his career, but he was always a road grader. He was that when he got on campus, and he's one of those where if you follow specific offensive line gurus on Twitter, like Cole Kubelik and Aaron Taylor and the guys that run the Joe Moore Award, which is the college trophy given to the best offensive line as a group of 5 in the college game. If you follow the people that do that, you'll see they'll tweet out gifs and clips of offensive linemen doing offensive lineman things. And one, Jedrek Wills is in there pretty often, and two, a lot of the times it's putting a vicious pancake on somebody in the run game. He was very good at that, and I imagine that's something that NFL franchises would like to get their hands on.
He played right tackle a lot, but Tua is a left-handed quarterback, so he's the blindside guy. Tell me a little bit about that, and do you have any doubt at all that if he gets flipped, the left tackle will be pretty seamless for him?
Yeah, I think it would be something that he could handle pretty well, if nothing else, because as you mentioned, he was at right tackle because Tua is left-handed. But I'm assuming in high school he played with a right-handed quarterback, so he was probably at left tackle there. When you have an offensive lineman of that quality at the high school level, you're almost always going to have them on the left side of the offensive line to protect a right-handed quarterback. So I'm assuming he has been on the left side of the offensive line in the past in games, and especially with all the time in between the end of a college season and the beginning of an NFL season, assuming those seasons start on time, thanks to everything we're dealing with right now. That's plenty of time to kind of take in the footwork and understand what he has to do on the left side of the line if the Browns or someone else chooses to do that.
Well, we mentioned Tua. Again, this is Brett Hudson, the Crimson Tide beat reporter for the Tuscaloosa News. Let's talk a little bit about Tua. From all the early reports were he's fine and he's healthy. What does he bring as a quarterback? You've seen a lot of Alabama football. What is Tua, and how confident are you that Tua can be a successful NFL quarterback as well?
Pretty confident because the arm talent is there. He's truly got a special arm. He's got something that you don't see all that often at the college level. You don't see quote unquote arm talent like that very often at this level, because those guys just don't come around very often at all. He absolutely has that. The accuracy with him is next level. Like most people want to hit the guy in the chest or in a pretty consolidated area on a slant route. Tua doesn't just stop at the chest. Tua hits guys in stride every single time on those slant routes. And that was something that was a big part of Alabama's offense last year. As the graphic just showed, there's a lot of wide receivers that are coming out of Alabama and are draftable prospects. So when you can hit those guys in stride, they are very rarely, if ever, going to be caught up to, especially from behind. And Tua was really good at hitting guys in stride in that regard. And the deep ball has always been there with him. And I don't have to tell y'all that that's something you got to have in NFL offenses. So he's someone who has everything you need to have in that left arm of his to be a long-time NFL player. And Nick Saban raves about who Tua is as a person in the locker room, as a leader. Tua is someone, and these are Nick Saban's words, but also things I've seen around the building. Tua is someone that people just seem to gravitate to. People seem to cozy up to Tua, and they're not really aware of the fact that they're doing it. They just tend to like the guy, and they like to be around him more often. And having a quarterback with those kinds of personality traits is obviously a good thing, since so much of the program culture in football can revolve around a quarterback. So when your quarterback is a relentlessly positive, likable person, that does a lot of good for your locker room. And it definitely benefited Alabama over Tua's 2 years as the full-time starter here. So he has all of the talent on the field, and he has the personality off the field that makes me think he can be a long-time NFL starter. The question is, can he stay healthy? You know, I try to avoid the injury-prone tag with him, because most of his injuries have been really fluky. Like how many times are you going to get tackled the way he did against Mississippi State, where you basically destroy one of your hips? Like that doesn't happen all that often. That's kind of a fluke. So I'm not calling him injury prone, but he does need to play a couple of full 16-game NFL seasons to prove that he's not. But as long as he is able to avoid that tag, he ought to be a really good NFL starter for a long time.
Let's talk a little bit about some of those wide receivers. A guy that I really like, Jerry Jeudy. I mean, seems like he's been playing forever for the Crimson Tide. And, the physical skill is there. And the more you hear, you've heard people say what a precise route runner he is, which to go with the physical skills, that'll make you an elite NFL receiver.
That's right. He's someone who gets open with how good he is as a route runner. His cuts are lethal. I mean, you make even a half of a wrong step, and that's all Judy needs. He won the Biletnikoff Award as a sophomore, which is given to the nation's best wide receiver, and he probably would have been in the running for it last year as a junior if he wasn't alongside two other guys that had somewhat legitimate claims to the award as well, Devontae Smith and Henry Ruggs III, who is also in this draft. Devontae Smith is coming back to school. So much so that none of them were actually finalists for the award because I'm assuming they stole votes from each other. It's rough life at Alabama, I suppose. But Judy is absolutely, you've nailed it. Judy is someone who has all the physical tools you need and is also an excellent route runner. I think that's how he gets open more than anything else, because when you have someone like him who catches passes in bulk like he does, you're going to get a lot of attention from defenses and schemes, and you're probably going to have the opponent's best cover guy on you, and you got to have really good route running skills to beat that on a consistent basis, which Judy did for 2 full seasons at Alabama.
Now, the other one, Ruggs, is a guy that just is flat out fast. I mean, and has good hands and runs pretty good routes, but the speed is top end.
The speed is what will get him drafted in the first round, I think. And I'm not trying to I know when you say that about a wide receiver, a lot of people's minds are going to go to Darius Hayward-Bay. That didn't go very well, but Ruggs is a little more of a complete wide receiver, the full package than Hayward-Bay was, in my opinion. Anyway, I'm not a talent evaluation expert by any stretch of the imagination. If I were, I'd be making a lot more money. But I think Ruggs is definitely the guy that impresses you with top end speed, and that's something that's pretty useful in the NFL. There are clips of him all throughout the season where his speed is just so unparalleled. There's actually a catch against Southern Miss. He is about 3 yards ahead, maybe 2 yards ahead of the guy, backpedaling, catching the ball maybe 15 yards away from the end zone, and he gains ground on the defensive back trying to chase him down. So he has time to catch the ball, turn around, go, and is still leaving this poor Southern Miss dude in the dust. That speaks to his amount of speed. And again, when a team wants to try to take him in the middle of the first round or near the end of it, the speed will be the number one reason why.
Let's talk a little bit more. There's two defensive backs, and Nick Saban was a really, really good defensive coordinator, and before that, a defensive back coach here with the Cleveland Browns. He always seems to have guys that succeed at the next level. Tell me a little bit about the two DBs that are on the board that are likely to be first-round picks, McKinney and Trayvon Diggs.
McKinney is someone who, in my opinion, was the best safety in the nation last year. I know there's a lot of debate around that with Grant Delpit out of LSU, J.R. Reed out of Georgia, and the Minnesota safety whose name is escaping me at the moment. But I thought Xavier was the best in the nation because he's so cerebral. He's obviously very talented. He covers space really well. He's got good ball skills. He knows how to handle the ball once he has it in his hands, which is a good thing because he gets in his hands somewhat regularly. But really what separates him is how cerebral he is. He's someone who played deep safety in most packages this year, but when Alabama went to dime, which you had to do pretty regularly given the era of the spread offense we were in, he went to basically the dime, the sixth defensive back, what Nick Saban calls money, the kind of overhang guy on one end of the secondary, so that they could put a freshman back in at deep safety, so they could kind of control the situations that talented deep safety freshman got to play in, and that puts a lot on Xavier McKinney's plate because you got to understand your opposing offense from two different positions, and Xavier is intelligent enough to do that, and he's obviously got the talent to cover a lot of field and be a difference maker at safety. Trayvon Diggs is a guy who He had a solid 2019 season. If you listen to the local chatter in Tuscaloosa, you'll hear people say that he got lit up against LSU. Well, if anybody watched 30 seconds of an LSU game this year, you saw they lit up everybody. Getting lit up by LSU doesn't say anything about you; it says everything about LSU. Other than that game, Trayvon Diggs was pretty solid, especially as a cover guy. He's not very physical. He's someone that would really have to, I don't know if it's add weight or just get a new mentality, but he needs to tackle better if he's going to be a number one corner guy in the NFL for a long period of time. But the coverage skills are absolutely there. The ball skills are absolutely there. I think everybody knows his brother is a starting wide receiver in the NFL. So the ball skills are there, the body control in the air, all of that skill is there. He's kind of a wide receiver playing corner in certain aspects. He just needs to be more physical as a tackler and as a run stopper and all those things. So if he's able to get a little meaner and find some tenacity in his game, he can stick around in the NFL for a while too. But it's also possible that just his coverage skills could keep him in the league for quite a while.
Brett Hudson, we appreciate it. He is the beat reporter for the Tuscaloosa News for the Crimson Tide of Alabama. We appreciate it. Thanks very much, Brett.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, we will take a break, and when we return, we'll check in with beat reporter from the Georgia side of things, the Alabama Banner Herald. We're talking some Andrew Thomas, another one of the tackles the Browns are looking at. More sports, less Levine Weekend Winners Edition will continue. Stay with us.
Get Nature Stone for up to half off and never replace your garage flooring again. Cracked, uneven garage floors are dangerous. Thin paints and poly coatings you can do yourself are slippery, peel, and don't correct problems. Why pay for a floor that won't last? Only a professionally installed Nature Stone garage floor is safe and corrects problems that paints can't. And Nature Stone comes with Russell's Promise, our true unconditional warranty. So there are no hidden maintenance costs. Schedule online today at naturestone.com to qualify for up to half off. Hurry, offer ends April 30th. It's not just a floor. Wow, it's Nature Stone.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Presque Isle Downs and Casino has sports betting. Use one of our 50 state-of-the-art Bet America kiosks to place your bet and watch your favorite games on one of our many HD televisions or visit our sportsbook area. Only at Presque Isle Downs and Casino.
Welcome back to More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. We continue previewing some of the guys the Browns are looking at that number 10 spot in the first round of the upcoming NFL Draft, focusing on the tackles and a guy whose name we keep hearing quite a bit, Andrew Thomas, the tackle from the University of Georgia. We welcome in Mark Weiser, and Mark is the Bulldogs beat reporter for the Athens Banner Herald. And again, Mark, appreciate the time. Tell me a little bit about Andrew, a guy that has started a number of years. What have you seen? How have you seen him develop in his time there at Georgia?
Yeah, he started all 3 seasons in Georgia, which is 41 games, missed a couple of games with some minor injuries. But, you know, he was a guy that came in as a high 4-star recruit and automatically or pretty quickly created some buzz, in the program. It was in the summer camp, his first year where, they put him at left tackle as a backup, but they had Isaiah Wynn there, who was was a first-round pick of the New England Patriots. They moved him to guard because they thought he was one of their best, 5 or 6 players, and he ended up moving over to right tackle. Started there as a true freshman over Isaiah Wilson, who is another guy that's getting some first-round mentions in this draft. And then when Wynn went to the NFL, Thomas was moved over on the left side and started there the last 2 years. And really kind of a glue guy in the program, a big leader, not necessarily the loudest talker, but a guy that everyone respected and played at a very high level.
When I mention Andrew Thomas, what comes to mind as a player, as an offensive lineman? What do you kind of envision from what you've seen of him with the Georgia Bulldogs?
Yeah, just a guy that you didn't really have to worry about too much, and a guy that you knew his side of the field, his side in the pass protection was very sound. Sam Pittman, who was his offensive line coach, he's already coached 5 NFL first-round draft picks in his time as a veteran offensive line coach, and he told me that Thomas is the most consistent player he's had throughout a career. So that says something about a guy that is expected to be a top 15 pick and runs a show for Pittman with these NFL.
When you look at the style of offense that they run a zone running scheme. That's kind of what the Browns are likely to move to this year with their new head coach, their new offensive system. Does he fit that scheme? It would seem like that's what he's been doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has the skill set and the size to be, a starter in any scheme in the NFL. And, particularly it's probably a good time with a new system that, everyone on the offense is going to be learning a new system. So he'll come in, and he's a quick study no matter what system he's in. A really smart guy and a guy that, something about his makeup. I was remembering back that when Georgia built their indoor facility or had like a groundbreaking for it, they chose Thomas to be the face of the program. He joined Kirby Smart. He joined the school president at this ribbon cutting ceremony for one of their new facilities. So, he's going to be, as much as an offensive lineman can be a face of a program, he certainly was at Georgia. And I think, in the NFL, no matter where he gets picked, he's going to be able to come in right away and be a starter.
Does he have that mean streak that you like to have in an offensive lineman, where he kind of wants to get after it and get a little physical in the run game as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's not a guy who necessarily thinks is going to be a trash talker or, obviously not privy to the talk in the trenches, but it wouldn't surprise me if he has a different personality than you see when he's around for an interview. And you might remember, I mentioned in 2017 he was a starter at right tackle. One of the guys he was clearing space for was Nick Chubb, who had a big senior season, and Thomas started, for a team that went to the Rose Bowl, almost won a national championship. So there's some familiarity, I'm certain, with Chubb, with what Thomas can do.
Another guy that is a senior and a potential first-round pick is Deandre Swift, running back. Now the Bulldogs have had quite lineage there. You had Gurley, then you had Nick Chubb, who we talked about, Sony Michel, Deandre Swift. Those are all guys that the first 3 have had a lot of success in the NFL. Tell me a little bit about Deandre Swift.
Yeah, Swift, had to wait his time. His freshman year, it was Nick, it was Sony Michel. But it was Deandre that had the big run against Auburn in the SEC championship game. It was 70 yards or so, kind of was the turning point of the game. Really, Georgia worked him in well behind his guys, and he certainly has the speed, the ability to make people miss in the open field. Really good cut ability. I'm sure you saw at the NFL Combine when they stuck Nick Chubb and Sonny Michel's 40 times the video of what they did against Swift. It was Swift the one that edged them 2 out in the 40 times. But a guy a little bit injury plagued, especially late in his junior season. He hurt his shoulder against Georgia Tech. and then was very limited in the SEC championship game, and in the Sugar Bowl he really only played a couple snaps. So I'm sure the NFL teams have examined his medicals, did the due diligence, and if he's not the first running back on in this draft, he'll probably be the second.
Well, Mark Weiser, the Bulldogs beat reporter for the Athens Banner Herald, we appreciate the time and the insights on the Georgia Bulldogs coming up, especially Andrew Thomas. Thanks for the time, Mark. Appreciate it.
Yeah, great to be with you. Take care.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this edition of More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. I want to thank all of the beat reporters that we have heard from, and Dan Labbe. Again, NFL Draft coming up on us in just a couple of weeks. Les Levine will be back in the chair Monday from 6 to 7. We'll see you again next Friday right here on cleveland.com. Have a great weekend and stay safe.